Hey everyone, I just finished reading the biography of Steve Jobs and I was blown away by his incredible story. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. Jobs was a visionary and a true innovator. He saw the potential of technology to transform our lives in ways that many others didn't, and he was willing to take risks and challenge the status quo in order to make his vision a reality. But what I found most inspiring about Jobs was his passion and dedication. He was a master at inspiring and motivating others to believe in his vision, and he poured his heart and soul into every project he worked on. If you're looking for some inspiration and motivation, I highly recommend reading the biography of Steve Jobs. It's an incredible story of a truly remarkable individual. Scott Forstall told a funny story about him that Steve and I would go to the cafeteria at Apple all the time, and he would insist on paying. I was like, "Steve, you're paying me enough that I can afford the $8 lunch," but he'd always want to pay. If he got his food before me, he'd wait at the line for me to get up there, and Steve would pay with his Apple badge like all the other employees. You'd come up there and you'd badge, and lunch would be directly withdrawn from your paycheck. I was like, "Steve, I feel like an ass when you're sitting up there waiting for me and I can't get any long cooking food." Steve just said, No, this is great. I only get paid $1 per year. I don't know who's paying every time. I badge." He was a multi-billionaire, scamming his own company over pizzas and salads. I made a short documentary out of this summary for those who prefer visuals. Jobs's biological parents were a woman from rural Wisconsin and a Syrian immigrant, both 23 years old at the time of his birth. As an infant, he was adopted by a middle-class couple who settled in Mountain View, California, near the eventual headquarters of Apple Computer. Growing up, Jobs knew little about his biological mother and virtually nothing about his father. Later in life, as an international celebrity, he even went to a restaurant his father owned near San Jose and shook his father's hand without knowing they were related. According to friends and family, the feeling that Jobs had been abandoned by his biological parents would be one of the driving influences in his life, leading him to lash out and be cruel to the people around him when he believed they had failed him. In 1970, Jobs was attending high school in Cupertino. There he was first introduced to the works of renowned poets, such as Dylan Thomas, and musicians, particularly Bob Dylan. While in high school, Jobs met Steve Wozniak, a socially awkward but gifted computer hobbyist. Jobs was not a computer, programmer, or engineer, but the two friends believed they balanced each other out. Wozniak was immature for his age, while Jobs was the opposite. While in high school, Jobs took LSD for the first time. Dropping acid was an intensely moving experience for him. As he would throughout his life, Jobs straddled distinct social groups in high school. He identified with those who were mainly interested in music and literature, as well as those who were interested in science and engineering. The combination of the two would remain a theme throughout his life and career. Shortly after dropping out of Reed College in 1972, Jobs traveled to India to learn more about Hindu spirituality. While there, he sharpened his understanding of the difference between intuition and knowledge, arguing later that having a strong intuition was more important than logic and analysis. Jobs came to realize that although he was not an abnormally intelligent person, he had extraordinary intuition. This was the source of his genius as a business leader. In 1975, Wozniak combined a microprocessor with a screen and a keyboard, allowing, for the first time, the machine's operator to type letters into a computer and watch them appear on the screen. Jobs was enormously impressed. Soon after, Jobs and Wozniak founded Apple Computer, which combined Wozniak's gift for building computer hardware with Jobs' talent for persuading people to take an interest in his projects. At the time, Wozniak considered himself a hobbyist and embodied the hacker belief that information should be free. He drew up schematics for computers and gave them away to friends. Jobs, however, saw the company as a vehicle for their creative endeavors. Although he was not motivated by a desire for wealth, he believed the company should seek a profit, if only to keep the endeavor going. With Jobs' encouragement, Wozniak built a series of combined monitors, keyboards, and microprocessors in wooden cases called the Apple I and sold them to friends in local computer stores. The computer was an instant success and the first of several technical and commercial achievements leading up to Apple's initial public offering on December 12, 1980. Although Jobs was always an inspiration to others at Apple, it was a number of years before he was ready to be the company's official leader. He was often abrasive with staff, ignored facts he disliked, and became extremely emotional during meetings. In 1983, at Jobs' urging, Apple hired John Sculley, an executive at PepsiCo, as president of the company. Sculley had no prior experience at a technology company. However, he was an adept marketer, and Jobs had always been a believer in the importance of marketing to bring the work of engineers to the world. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh, the first mass-market computer to use a mouse and a graphical interface. Having a graphical interface meant the computer rendered individual pixels to form the shape of customized fonts and icons instead of rendering letters in the way that all previous mass-market computers had done. Unlike previous Apple computers, the Macintosh was also a closed system, meaning owners could not modify it as they wanted. The closed system would remain a trait of Apple products into the future. When the Macintosh failed to meet sales expectations, Jobs became irate and prone to mood swings, frequently lashing out at employees for the company's struggles. Following this series of breakdowns, Sculley initiated the process of removing Jobs from his leadership role at Apple. Jobs then went on to start another company, Next Computer, which designed and built high-end computers and software for universities. At Next, Jobs indulged in his tendency toward perfectionism to the detriment of the company and its products. He insisted, for example, that the core of the computer's hardware be housed in a cube, despite the fact that a cube posed an engineering challenge and was more expensive to manufacture. In 1986, Jobs purchased Pixar, a graphics and hardware division of Lucasfilm, for almost $50 million. Jobs saw Pixar's leaders as fellow creative souls and encouraged them to pursue their own films. The first of these was Toy Story, which benefited from creative input and distribution through a relationship with Disney, which Jobs brokered. Toy Story kicked off a trend in computer-animated films, and Pixar made Jobs a billionaire. In 1997, Jobs returned to Apple to correct some of the flaws he saw in the company's management under Sculley. The company, he believed, had shifted its priorities from making great products that could sell well and make money to simply making as much money as quickly as possible. Over the next several years, Jobs solidified his control and eventually became CEO. For several years, Jobs served as both CEO of Apple and Pixar, a stressful period which he later blamed for a breakdown in his health. By this time, Jobs had fathered 3 children with his wife, Lorene Powell, and another child, Lisa, with a prior girlfriend. He saw his family very little. Under Jobs' leadership, Apple entered a period of commercial success, beginning with the release of the iMac in 1998, followed by the iPod in 2001. Throughout this time, Jobs demanded that his engineers design products that were simple, easy to understand, and intuitive to use. The iPod became an extraordinarily successful product, outselling every other portable music player, largely because of its design. To supply the iPod with music, Jobs introduced the iTunes Store, which sold individual songs for 99 cents. The store exceeded 6 million downloads in its first week, making it the first ever successful attempt to sell digital music on a large scale. The iTunes Store demonstrated Jobs' desire for an integrated system in which Apple software worked seamlessly with Apple hardware. These traits would carry over into Apple's next major successes, the iPhone and the iPad. Under Jobs' direction, Apple introduced the App Store, a digital marketplace for software to use with Apple phones, tablets, and computers. With the success of the App Store and the iPhone in particular, Apple became the most valuable corporation. in the world. In 2003, Jobs was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Just as he had ignored other inconvenient facts in his life and at Apple, he dismissed the advice of his doctors, avoiding surgery in favor of a strict vegan diet and acupuncture. For the next several years, Jobs' health progressively worsened. During intermittent periods when he regained some strength, he devoted his time to Apple over his family. In 2011, Jobs took a final leave of absence from the company. He died a short time later.